in Earth Sciences Department. We have Dr. Thomas Bretz, who's an associate professor of philosophy and humanities. He is also the co-director of the Environmental Studies program and an environmental ethics fellow at UVU's Center for the Study of Ethics. We have Valentina Ramirez, who is a student here at UVU in environmental studies and the winner of the Design for Impact. And then finally we have Dr. Jessi Hill, who is the director of project-based learning with the Innovation Academy. So let's give them a round for coming and speaking to us all here today. And we'll open it up. We want to start?
Okay, so as Meaghan mentioned, I don't know if I need this. I'll try to be louder without a microphone, but it seems like this is better. So I'm associate professor and chair for Earth Science. Just by the name, you can see how cool our department is, right? So in my opinion, sustainability is so broad. Basically, you can experience it in your daily life. So we teach students through classes, through research about sustainability. We also offer, study abroad programs. So when you visit other places, other countries, you will see the difference people are making. So the first thing is you have to know why sustainability is important, right? And then take actions, learn how to do it. So for instance, in our department, we offer sustainability and the environment. That is a very popular class since it's a social science GE class. Everybody has the chance to take it. We also offer energy on Earth. Then is another topic we talk a lot, right? Sustainability is not only about water, it's not only about energy. Since everything is related, whatever we do is really relevant to this topic in our daily life. So before we started the panel, I was talking to Jessi. So when I go to Italy in the summer, in a little mountain village town, people there, they're taking significant effort. They're recycling everything. There are no mandatory rules. They just do it. I don't know how they can do that well. But basically they recycle paper, aluminum, glass, organic, and everything else. If you cannot find the right place, it's called residue. So people are doing that without other people telling them. They're just doing it by themselves. So one day, if we can raise the awareness of sustainability and its importance, first on campus and then spread it to the community, everyone works together through classes, through research. Oh, by the way, I have to mention one important research project we're going to carry out. So physics, chemistry, and earth science, we're going to develop a tiny house project, which means we're going to make a little tiny house container, and it's going to be a stand-alone little structure, and we're going to use all the energy sources, renewable energy sources, to power the little house, and then recycle water. We try to establish this model on campus, like a prototype, and then invite community partners come to visit to learn the concepts. So once we get to know more, and then we will learn more on how we can help, how we can do it.
Thank you very much, Weihong. Yeah, I will say that I'm always like a little bit jealous of earth science because you get to do all the practical stuff. So I'm in philosophy and humanities. Yeah, my name is Thomas Bretz, and it's a bit more abstract, but I do think personally, right, that sustainability involves basically any and all disciplines and professions and outlooks, because it is really about rethinking society as a whole. I want to just mention a few things that I'm involved with, and maybe talk a little bit about, especially for the students in the room, right? Like if you're interested in sustainability, how to go about this. So one, I want to kind of maybe mention the three big across campus events that we have each year that I'm involved with. Like one is the Sustainability Summit, right? Which is mostly about community engagement and also cooperations, right, with citizen organizations, businesses. This is usually in the spring around Earth Day, April 22nd, or Earth Month. And then we also have in the fall Sustainability Week, and that's kind of also especially focused on giving people a sense of what's happening on campus, right? Again, working with community organizations as well in Orem Provo. And then part of that is also the Environmental Ethics Symposium. And that kind of adds a more, I would say, academic, theoretical take, right? Like there's often kind of topics, right? Like kind of, say, women and the environment, or Utah Lake we had a few years ago, right? Where we invite both people who are more on the activist side, but also kind of academics who kind of have more theoretical takes on this. So these are kind of maybe the big events to pay attention to, right? If you're interested in sustainability. In terms of how to get involved, right? I would generally say that UVU is pretty responsive to what students want, right? I think like what UVU is and isn't doing has a lot to do with what students are demanding and, kind of how vocal they are about it, right? Like, so if you're like happy with, certain things at UVU in terms of sustainability, let kind of administration know about that, because they'll note that. And if you're unhappy, let people know as well, right? Because if you, think we could do more, I don't know, for recycling, right? Like, just make your voice heard, right? Because that's, I think, quite effective, and I think the only way things are gonna, I think, change. Right, and we have like clubs as well, right? There's on and off, right? Various kind of clubs related to sustainability, right? So you can also join a club, or if there isn't any club you wish there was, just create your own club. Another way to get involved is, so I think, at least I think a bunch of us in the room are on the sustainability committee, and that's open to anyone in the UVU community, right? So it's students, staff, faculty, right? And there's no level of commitment that is required, right? So if you just want to attend sessions and listen in, that's totally fine, right? So really don't hesitate. And Sarah Bateman is probably our sustainability director, is probably the best person to contact about that. But also, I think anyone on this panel, you can contact and just ask as well, how do I get involved with the sustainability committee? I think related in terms of classes, right, that people teach, there's like so many classes that are related to sustainability. Weihong mentioned a few, right? There's a class on climate change, sustainability. I'm teaching animal ethics, environmental ethics, among others. But I would also say, if there is a class you wish there was and there isn't, right, like try to, again, right, talk to your department chairs, your professors, and just get maybe some other interested students together, approach a professor you think would be good for them, and ask, hey, we'd really love a class on this. Do you think you would be willing to teach that, right? And again, I think that's oftentimes that just works, and professors will be happy to teach a class based on student demand, right? So look at the classes are there, but also just ask, can we actually create this class, right? Because we would be really interested in it. And one last thing that I maybe would say in terms of my role, so together with Hilary Hungerford, I'm co-directing the environmental studies minor in the fall to be a major, so we're very excited about that. It is housed with earth science, and I'm kind of more on the humanities and social science side of this, right, whereas Hilary's kind of taking care of the natural science side. And with that too, right, like if you're curious about what is offered in a given year in that vein, even if you maybe don't want to major or minor in environmental studies, also just reach out to me, reach out to Weihong, reach out to Hilary Hungerford, and just ask, hey, I'm interested, what are the kind of the classes this year that are available, right? Like, and again, I would mostly be able to tell you about humanities and social science, and then Weihong and Hilary would be able to really tell you what's offered on the kind of natural science side. I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah, should we just go down the line? Yeah.
That's great.
Give it over to Valentina.
Hi guys. I thought I'd begin my presentation by just introducing myself really quick. My name is Valentina Ramirez. I'm a first generation student from Mexico, and I'm currently pursuing my bachelor's in environmental studies, science. It's kind of tricky how it works here. And this year I had the opportunity to be the Social Entrepreneurship and Corporate Social Responsibility Fellow at the Center for Social Impact on campus. I really think that this was a great opportunity, and I really tried to push it on every student and faculty member as much as I can, because the systems thinking framework that the center encourages to kind of approach systems and problems, it really has enhanced and informed the way I conduct and engage with both qualitative and quantitative research about sustainability, and principally because that's the thing that I'm like most interested about. And actually, there's a plethora of ways you can get involved in the center, but they have two main big ones, which are like research-based like projects. It's called Design for Impact and Map the System. And I was a participant in Design for Impact last year, where I focused on how can we prioritize and defend the voices of environmental activists in the global south. Because when I think of sustainability, I think that the way that like Western and first world countries approach this like framework is very much based on like meritocracy, right? Is how the individual does things and what can the individual fix. And this is not a good way to approach this at all. When you like kind of zoom out of the picture and see that there's like a bunch of loops and little problems that fit into the bigger problem. So sorry, I'm just like looking at my notes. So by just focusing on the individual, even though it isn't inherently bad, it definitely like obscures and like helps like erase like marginalized communities and like in these spaces when we talk about sustainability and climate change, because we just ignored all the communal intersections between like income and class and gender, which are important things to approach these problems about. Specifically because I don't know about you guys, but like I've seen a lot of like organizations that like that encourage like off-grid living or self-sustainable lifestyles without even recognizing that we're like using indigenous land and indigenous resources, which feeds directly into the ongoing genocide that the United States has, put Native communities throughout, and how it disrupts their land sovereignty. Also, how usually when we talk about sustainability, we co-opt indigenous methodologies and their ways of living without giving proper recognition for it. It's crazy because when you think about it, most people living in reservations, they lack basic needs, and it's crazy because 30% of all Navajo Nation households don't have access to drinking water. So those are just like a few things that I kind of like to see sustainability on it. And by being a fellow at the center, it has really given me access and resources to kind of learn how to approach these issues in a way that I take in account the frameworks and the actions rather than just being quick going to like making decisions, because oftentimes that turns out more problematic than it isn't. Yes, I think that's all I would like to say. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you very much. So I'm the Director of Project-Based Learning on campus, and I was wondering, by a raise of hands, how many of you could define what project-based learning is in your own words? Just so I know how much you know. Thank you, Jeremiah. Yes, you can. Jeremiah is a director also at the Innovation Academy, does project-based learning outside the curriculum. I do it within the curriculum. So what I'm going to talk about today with you is how can we incorporate it in our courses. So my background isn't in sustainability, but it is in pedagogy. And so we at UVU have adopted the PBL model of project-based learning, where you take a big and a challenging question or a problem in the community. You can already see sustainability is the big question here, right? We can take that as a big question and pose it to our students. So for example, there are a couple of really cool projects on the PBL Works website, and normally they have K through 12 project ideas, but those are a great place to go to start. If you go to PBL Works for project-based learning works.org/projects, you can look too. If you type in sustain, hit search. There's some great places where you can start getting ideas for projects that you can incorporate into your own classes, such as amid rapid urbanization, how can we redesign and build cities to be more sustainable? That's a great question that students would be very interested in. Here's another fun one they have listed there. The ultimate design challenge. How can we redesign our product's packaging to make it more environmentally friendly? These are all questions that capture students' attention that can help them learn the material in the course and also learn about sustainability in a way where they can take it and apply it to their own lives and help the community while they're doing it. So for example, in project-based learning, there are several different steps. You have the challenging problem or question, and then students are expected to do sustained inquiry. So for a long period of time, several weeks, maybe even the whole semester, depending on how your class is designed, you have them think about this question and work on this authentic problem, something that is meaningful to the community and themselves. Providing student voice and choice is very important, letting students pick what they want to do. So if it's like, how do we redesign packaging? Let the students pick which packaging they want to redesign. Or if it's, is there a building we can redesign in the community? Let them go out and pick the building. Key to this is reflection, because students will get so busy doing the project because it's cool and it's exciting and they love it, that they often will forget to pause and think about, well, while I'm redesigning this package, what am I learning about sustainability or cultural appropriation or the culture of the society that, like in Italy, where they just naturally sort of sort over time, they've learned to do that. So pausing to reflect is really key in project-based learning. Having an opportunity to have their work critiqued and revised, whether by a faculty member or a fellow student or a community member, is very important as well. And then a public product. They have to be able to present something to their classmates or the community. At UVU, we hope that it goes to the community. We encourage folks to partner with individuals outside the institution to make a project. So for example, some of the folks that we've worked with have been what's the name of the forest? It's not the USDA, the US Forest Service, that's what they're called. We've worked with them before. We've worked with the Water District up in Salt Lake City before. There are a lot of folks out there where we can have an impact on sustainability that we can partner with outside the institution. So if you are a faculty member and are interested in learning about project-based learning, there is a teaching excellence certification that you can take that will help you learn how to incorporate that in your class. If you're a student, you can ask your faculty member, hey, do you have the project-based learning certification? And if not, send them to the Office of Teaching and Learning and have them do that. That's fabulous. And then for first-year students, we have UVU Accelerate, which is the summer program I oversee that is all project-based learning. So if you're a faculty member, please teach for UVU Accelerate and incorporate sustainability in that, because I would love to support that as part of the summer program. And if you're a first-year student, please, you may be eligible to have a free class that could incorporate sustainability when these fine folks have an Accelerate course. And if you're not a first-year student, please tell all the first-year students about that. But I'm very excited to talk about project-based learning with you and how we can leverage it to increase awareness of issues around sustainability and make real change in the community.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to try and, can I take this up? Okay, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yes.
This is for Weihong. The small house, where is that? Is that going to be on campus, or tell us more?
We plan to be yeah, we do plan to build it on campus. It's more like the shipping container. We're going to try to use that. So basically, we try to power this little container with all renewable sources without connecting to the grid, basically, right? So which means this concept could be useful if we're talking about remote areas or even some developing countries if they need housing in very remote area without any power or water. So this could be a good concept to start with. Yeah, we're going to have a container on campus. We will have students involved in building everything from scratch, and then we invite all the partners, local community members to visit. It's going to be a cool exhibition on campus. Yeah, we plan to do it in fall this coming fall semester. Yeah.
Let me know more about it.
We'll do for sure.
Wonderful, thank you. Other questions?
I have a really loud voice. So
well, for the
probably don't
recording.
need that.
Let's do it for the recording.
So I just have a question for all of you, and maybe people in the room too. How do we get students engaged in sustainability? Because we offer all of these really cool things, and we are all passionate about it, but it's really hard to get the students engaged. So I guess my question is how ideas that you guys have on how we can do that better.
Okay. So that is a great question, it's a tough question. Basically, you know, everything in life is a learning journey. I feel like if we want students participate in something, we need ask them to do something first, which means you have to have like a curious question they want to explore. So for instance, in my like intro GE classes, I do ask students to do a water usage and energy usage assignment to estimate how much water they use, how much energy they use daily. So sometimes they were so surprised to see, oh, this much water I'm using every day because I'm taking a long shower, or I'm leaving the faucet on while I'm brushing my teeth. Those kind of little things. People are not aware of those things. Just like yesterday in our seminar, we have a speaker from the state agency, the Department of Environmental Quality. So the speaker gave one example. If we use our leaf blower for 1 hour, the pollutants, everything emitted to the atmosphere equivalent for one person driving from Salt Lake to California somewhere. So you can see, well, I didn't know about that. So which means in the future, probably I do have a electric one. But the thing is, you have to consider where the electric coming from, right? There are so many things to consider. But the first, you have to kind of help people to understand, to be aware that using very relevant examples, something they do every day. So I feel like after the students did the assignments, I did ask them to reflect at the end of the semester which unit they enjoyed the most, always, then unit, like water usage, power usage. They always rated it so high because they learned so much. They are going to change. They told me in their discussion board, on the discussion board, they are going to make small changes in their daily life. And this is what I think is very important.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Weihong said, and maybe just add two things to that, right? Like two things come to mind for me. One is, you know, I don't know how many people have taken or are familiar with the Foundations of Inclusion workshops, right? And I think one thing that is often central to these workshops is, you know, like no matter what the topic is, right? Like, I don't know, be it like, you know, like race issues or gender, or, you know, like veterans, right? There's often this sense of try to kind of integrate what you learn into kind of both in the way you interact with students in general, but also into your classes, right? And that, like, there's now a lot of, you know, kind of ways in which even disciplines that seem remote from a certain issue, like you can find ways to integrate it, right? So I would say if there's maybe a way to also have these kinds of workshops for faculty, right, that kind of really are both a space for faculty to learn, well, how do we integrate sustainability, but also a place maybe to talk to each other, right? Because I mean, I often feel when I talk to colleagues, I like get a lot of good ideas about what other people are doing, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that before, right? But then I just need to hear it. So that's, I guess, on the faculty side, right, that it can be, you know, brought up in various ways. I think the other thing I would just maybe mention, I'm not quite sure maybe what that means for us, right? But we are, you know, we have a very large student body, right? A very diverse student body, and we also have a lot of students who come from politically conservative backgrounds, right? And that in the US, I think unfortunately means that oftentimes there is a kind of worry about sustainability, right? And it hasn't always been that way, right? The Clean Air, Clean Water Act, right, that was passed by Nixon, right? A lot of the national parks were established by conservative and Republican administrations. But I think in the last 50 years or so, there has been this idea you can't be conservative and care about conservation, right? And I think, you know, Maria Blevins, who a lot of us in this room knows, right, like, you know, sometimes use this line, right, there are only a few letters separating conservatism and conservation, right? And I had students, you know, came in skeptical of climate change, kind of thanked me afterwards more or less to identify as conservative, that they kind of felt, okay, I can still be conservative but also care about this thing. And so I do think there is and I don't know how to do this exactly, but there's a need to kind of have some various forms of outreach, and then the faculty are part of this, various centers, right, like the Center for Social Impact are part of this, the Center for the Study of Ethics I work with has a lot of events on civil discourse, right, that somehow we get into the conversation, right, that you're not kind of, that basically political convictions are not destiny, and that in the end we all care about clean air, clean water, and kind of need to convey that, so to prevent students from just automatically saying, oh, that's not for me, right? There's the sense of, no, it's for everyone, right? Because this is about our community, our school, it's about Orem and Provo and Leah and all the surrounding communities, and allowing people to flourish, right? And somehow finding a way to communicate that to everyone. That's maybe what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and actually I love what you guys said about it, because I like being on the other side of the spectrum, as an actual student, especially like a student of color. I encourage like organizations and club professors and staff to actively like research, and if we know that like things like race and gender and income are things that are actively affecting student involvement in campus, and how can we open space for them at the table so they can feel like their voices are not only welcome, they're accepted, they are needed and prioritized as well.
I think you guys are amazing. And there was a lot of discussion about how do we change attitudes? How do we reach people and change minds? And I'm a psychologist, and so I was thinking about how do I do it the other way around? Because cognitive dissonance tells us that sometimes we can change behavior, and that will lead to an attitude change. So I'm going to approach it backwards, just for the sake of being contrary. So there was a study once where they had people come in, and they went to the lab, and they had to do these tremendously boring tasks for a whole hour. Like so boring you want to cry after the first 10 minutes, and then you have to sit there a whole hour, and they made them do this. And then afterwards, they said to them, hey, there's someone else waiting outside going to do this experiment, and we really need them to do it, and we don't want them to leave. So can you please tell them how fun it was to do this, okay? And I'll pay you $20. Will you go do that? And I'm like, fine. And so they would go out, and this is the best experiment ever, thanks. They give them the $20. There was another set of people they had come in. They said, we really need the person to think this is fun and do this experiment. I'll pay you $1 to go do this. And they said, okay, fine. And they went and they paid them. But there's a dissonance, right? Like if I'm going to lie to these people, I feel like, well, $20 might be worth a lie. Okay. And then the people who got $1, well, that's not really worth it to lie to somebody about this hour of pain and misery that they're going to go through. And so when you ask them afterwards how fun really was the task, the people who got the $20, they felt like, okay, that was worth it. There's no dissonance between my attitude and my behavior. This was super boring. $20 made it worth it to lie. But for the people who had the $1, there was this dissonance because that value wasn't there. It wasn't worth it. And then we saw a shift in attitude. They said, oh no, that task was really more fun than I thought it was more interesting, things like that. So what I think this suggests to us is that if we can get students in situations where there's project-based learning, of course I have to say that, right? But also like think about service learning and other ways we can get them to be active, where they have to go and engage in these sustainability behaviors. Even if they're experiencing this, well, I don't think there's climate change, or I don't think I'm a cause of anything. By engaging in those behaviors, it pulls them out of alignment with their attitude, and it creates this open door to question and to maybe change attitude over time. Does it always work? No, it depends on the situation, but at least it's a way to open a door.
Wonderful, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
I don't know if it's a question. It might sound more like a shameless plug. It seems like the common thread running through each one of these is the political component. And the reason it's a shameless plug is because I'm a political scientist here on campus, and we have classes in our political science program that are specifically geared towards sustainability. We've got a sustainable mountain development class. We've got a class completely devoted to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've got an environmental politics class coming online next year. So I think that might be the missing piece here, that there's the science behind sustainability, there's the ethics behind sustainability, there's the doing of sustainability, but it also requires political action beyond the you want me to sit up there? Understanding the political elements to all of this. You talk about the conservatism and the cognitive dissonance behind it, but just simply learning about the impact that a student can have, or just a citizen can have on governmental entities, I think is also a critical piece of the element. So everybody should take those classes. There you go. Thank you.
To continue the shameless plug, I totally agree, because I think, and this is just me, I don't know if this is true for everyone, I feel like watching my children grow up, they don't really understand how to engage civically about the issues that they care about. They don't understand the structure of local government. How does that play into state government? How does that relate to, the federal government and the issues of federalism and state powers? So I say Jay is correct, and everybody should do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the governance or the political side is very important, actually. So in a lot of countries, it's a mandate. You have to have certain percentage of power from renewable sources, right? So even though this is kind of political, but at the end of the day, it's everyone's life. You live on the same earth. Unless they realize, oh, this is really important. When we talk about the climate change, it's not something up for discussion anymore. It's just a fact. It's happening. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Everyone needs to care about the environment that you live, right? So at the end of the day, if we make it like a politically correct, which means we put more money into the sustainability, at the same time, we try to help people to see the relevance, why I need to care about this stuff, right? So combining everything, all the efforts, really important. But I do agree, the political part is super important, since those are the people giving out money, making policies and regulations, right?
Yeah, maybe also just to add and reaffirm everything that's been said, and going back to something I said earlier, right, encouraging students to get engaged at UVU, right? I think one issue that people often run into once they start thinking of political systems is this feeling of powerlessness, right? Especially if you talk something about climate change, right? It involves, right, like 100-something countries and various international organizations. But I do think in that sense it is a real privilege to be, I think, part of something like UVU, right, which is the largest school in Utah. And norms shift usually and often if some large institution actually does something differently, and suddenly something that was unthinkable before becomes normal, right? Think about lawns are totally the rule right here in a kind of semi-arid climate. If UVU just got rid of them, I think that would send a message, right? And part of that is that you can really this is an organization that's large enough to matter and small enough that your voice really matters, right? And it can really amplify your voice. And of course, we're a state school too, right? That also means there might be limits of what UVU can do based on what the legislators do or don't do. And with that, I've also heard so many people work with legislators reiterate over and over again, right? Do write your legislators, call your legislators, right? That they, I see why people might think, oh, nothing I do matters, right? And there are big forces at play that sometimes might induce cynicism. But there's also this other side that things do change if representatives hear from their constituents, but they need to hear from people, right? And so I would just kind of reiterate, right, the political element and also the local political element, and kind of don't get cynical about your local institutions, right? Because they, there are still very strong democratic elements in terms of responsiveness to kind of individual local input.
Yeah, sure. I think that what you said is completely true, and I completely agree. But I just want to add that I think sustainability is inherently political, because when we think of sustainability, we usually think of off-grid living and self-sustainable lifestyles, which are not something that all people can afford. And it's something to keep in mind, especially not classes, but for people don't use plastic, don't use this, don't use that. There's people who generally cannot afford it, either in their social, political, so it's just being aware of like the intersections, because that's important. Like for us to really tackle these issues, like we have to understand that it's just like learning political, but why is it like a person cannot approach their representatives because they don't feel represented by them? So then how can we teach the students? For me, for example, I'm an international student, so it's not like I just go to the YouTube Capitol and be like, yes, change this, because I know realistically my voice does not hold as much power as like a person, like a citizen from here, and much less from like a white head, you know, like Utah man. So yeah, it's just like being aware that the needs of people truly change so much on the way they're living and how they interact and navigate through the systems. It's important to see how we can meet their needs and tackle the systems underneath what's stopping them from participating or being involved on campus or local politics and stuff like that.
Can I just add one quick
Yeah.
thing? I just finished reading a book called Saving Us by Catherine Hayhoe, and she addresses a lot of these things that we've talked about in here, specifically how do you meet people of a different political persuasion on terms that matter to them, so you're not immediately turning them off. And one of the things she brings out is that the single greatest predictor of whether you care about the environment is your political party. And given the fact that we live here in such a conservative environment, and given the fact that we've got, 43,000 students on campus, this is an opportunity to really make a difference for this 3 or 4 years or 5 years that students are on campus. So just wanted to add that to the conversation. Great input from everybody.
Okay, we've got a couple of hands over here. We'll go to the front and then back behind.
Thank you. Hi, I'm one of the directors for the Center for Social Impact, and I love that we're talking about all of these different pathways. That's the framework that we use. We use that we're trying to make social impact through different pathways. And like the policy and governance is one pathway, right? And I appreciate you bringing that up. And I'm sitting here looking out with these huge windows, and there's Utah Lake, right? And we're looking at all these cars driving, and we think about all the different pathways that intersect with each other. When we create things, or when we're trying to solve issues where marginalized communities specifically are being hurt and harmed, it's so important to acknowledge all the different intersections in the systems. Even something as simple as this building right here, because I know this is a new building, right? What systems is this building intersecting with? What are these windows intersecting? Think of the birds, right? And I think all of us are really passionate about this, and who are here, or else we probably wouldn't be here. And we all do have such a unique perspective. And so my question for you four is, how do your different perspectives, how are we collaborating with each other? How are we coming together in order, because one, like I have blind spots, I have gaps because of my identities. And so I have to lean on my community and my people, and not just that, but all living things around us, from like indigenous theory, right? It's not just the human race we're talking about, it's everything involved. And how do you four engage in all of those intersections? And maybe specifically because we talked about the power dynamic with the university, and like you have this great opportunity. I'm not sure who you are, but you mentioned like being here for like these 4 years in the university, and that's a great power dynamic, right? The university holds a lot of power. How do you use your power and your intersections to create change?
That's a gigantic question.
I know, huge. Whatever comes to mind.
Thank you.
That is a great question. I think McKasy from Center for Social Impact, she always gives a workshop for our Utah Lake summer program. This summer is going to be the last one. It's called System Thinking, right? So I'm so glad you mentioned Utah Lake. I have been working on Utah Lake for a long time. So 10 years ago when I came to UVU, I remembered I was in the Lake View room in the library. there was an event. Somebody said, "Oh, what is that lake?" They didn't even know the lake's name. And then not many people were interested in this lake at all. However, our department kind of started doing a lot of research in the lake to see the human impact on the water quality and the water issues we face as a whole in Utah, since we're the second driest state in the nation, right? But back to your question, I think system thinking is crucial here. So for our project, for instance, we bring in people from communication, from business, from social science, from physical science. So different aspects, we can explore the research questions, application questions. So our students, we have a cohort every summer. So they are learning everything all together. Doesn't matter what their major is. They are learning things about Utah Lake from different angles. So at the end, they really appreciate the opportunity to see the lake holistically, because you cannot think this is just a lake. It's a resource. It's everything, because you're contributing to the water cycle in the atmosphere, agriculture-related recreational activities, everything connected. So we have to think as a system. So our project was very impactful from that aspect.
Thanks for that, and also thanks for the question. I think there's a lot in there, and maybe just talking a little bit to my, I guess, personal journey, right? Like, one is, I think that I do think that, I know it's beyond like academics, right? But one is definitely kind of the interdisciplinary element of it, right? Which is one of the nice things about being at a university, and interdisciplinary also involving academic disciplines, but also people on the ground. And for me, I think my approach often has been, when I'm new to a space, that, sometimes for even like a couple of years, I mostly just listen, right? Like, and just kind of get a feel for what different people do, what different people know, right? And kind of, like wait until I kind of have a sense of, well, what is it that I maybe can contribute, right? And so I think that might maybe sometimes feel that it doesn't do justice to the urgency, right, of kind of what needs to be done. But I think in the end, in the long run, it makes it more productive, and it is important also maybe to build good relations, right, with people around you, to kind of not, come in there, guns blazing, and be like, I'm going to solve all of this, right? I think maybe in line with that, actually, weirdly enough, when you mentioned kind of, this idea of all my relations, what that also made me think of is just also maybe that everyone needs to remember, right, on the one hand, all our relations, all the ways in which we relate to the world can make us powerful if we relate in the right way, but they can also be overwhelming, right? There's also the sense of if there's just too much hitting you at the same time. So I think this goes back, right, kind of to this idea of self-care and Audre Lorde and Black feminism, right? That self-care actually isn't, if it's done right, it's not selfish, it's not just, bubble baths and, cucumbers on the eyes, right? But it's actually like thinking of yourself as a person in community, but also a person who kind of needs to kind of have time for themselves, work on themselves. And this could be, a walk in nature or something like that. And so also remember that, right? That it's not, that each of us is responsible, but it's not on any one of us to just save the world, right? That's just not feasible, either in terms of outcomes or in terms of our personal well-being, right? So it's okay also to sometimes just take a break and kind of, in that sense, maybe shut off relations for a while and say, okay, I just need to be for myself for now. And I just want to put that out there as well, but that's important to remember.
Yeah, so I'm meditating still, and I'm not landing in a work sort of zone. I'm not landing in a curricular sort of zone. I'm landing in a personal sort of zone, because I am an intersection, as we all are. And I'm going to take you on a little personal journey with me for a second. My mom was adopted, so we never knew who her people were. So I was raised by my Puerto Rican father and my mom with no ties to some larger ancestry, and my mom passed, my father passed, and I decided I'm going to do ancestry. I want to know what the answer is, and I started working on my family history. And so I found that my people are both the colonizer and the colonized, the people who murdered and who were murdered, the people who lived with the land and the people who took over the land and dominated the land. And I've been meditating on that a lot as I exist in the world, as I exist at home with my family. How do I use the space that I'm in? And this sounds so silly, but when you have a lot of little kids who leave the lights on, am I turning off the light when I leave the room? Am I turning off the water when I'm done brushing my little teeth, right? And how do I embody my values as somebody who cares about the land in which I live, the land that belonged to people before I existed, right? And how do I communicate that to the people around me? I'm an intersection of politics. I'm a fiscal conservative and a social moderate, maybe liberal. I don't know where that lands right now. And so how do I have conversations with people who land in those different other patterns that don't match with mine but aren't bad, they're just different. And I think, as I'm thinking about the idea of how do we collaborate for sustainability, how do we use our power in the intersections of those things, I think maybe envisioning myself as being on a journey, on a pathway that sometimes intersect with people and sometimes are parallel to people, but we're all going on a journey. And how do I invite people on a journey with me, keeping in mind where they are? Can they afford the class? Can they afford, to live a sustainable lifestyle, to engage in those things that I value? So I know that doesn't really answer the question, but those are the thoughts I thought about when you asked that really amazing, big, powerful question.
Okay, I do know we are coming to or at the end of our time. I do want to end with our final question here.
So seeing that you'll have a lot of things here at UVU, I just want to know what was the best event or the best thing to have students end up being involved in sustainability, and just what have y'all seen as the best event or the best practice to get them involved?
Thank you.
Is it working? Yeah, it is. Well, not to self-plug, but also to self-plug, as a fellow for the Center for Social Impact, I completely forgot to mention this in my first speech, my first spiel, but how I got involved with it is because I participated in this thing called Design for Impact. And basically what we do, it's like a equity-centered design program where you kind of pick a social issue you're passionate about and then look at all the intersections on that and then come up with a prototype. And I think that really has shaped the way of how I interpret and how I read data. And I know that, for example, it literally was just a week ago, and one of the teams that won, they were focusing on how to reclaim outdoor spaces for queer, trans, Black, Indigenous women of color, and they got $1,500. So now with that money, they're being able to put workshops to invite community members to enjoy in the outdoors, which it's a great opportunity for students because $1,500 towards that goal, it goes a long way. I also know that another of the runner-up teams were talking about how declaring the Great Salt Lake as a sacred landmark could actually revitalize it, and kind of a lot of the approaches that we take to the Great Salt Lake are not really useful or are not yielding the results that we wanted to. It's because we're not prioritizing Indigenous voices. So it's just a really great way to not only have good research background, but also because you can give that research outside of the Center for Social Impact, because I know some teams have presented to local organizers have gone to Oxford, for example. It's a really big thing, so you should look into it if you're interested.
So you can join our monthly meetings. We do have a sustainability committee meeting on campus. Everyone is welcome. And also, I think just like the political science professor mentioned, another way to participate, what's your name?
My name is Flynn. I'm actually a student of BYU, and I work for the BYU Office of Sustainability.
Awesome.
And so that's why I'm trying to see.
Okay, then it's great. Thanks for coming. I think our students can run for some positions. For instance, the UVUSA is a student organization. So if students try to voice their concern or their need for more sustainable growth on campus, then it could be super important. I think others mentioned students have more power than like stuff, and the faculty combined, like, so if you guys say something, the university will listen more.
Keep this brief because I know we're out of time, but I would maybe just say, like, the single most impactful thing I've seen, especially when people are skeptical of sustainability, is just build trust relationships, right? I think also all the research on how you bridge gaps is that you don't just jump in there and say, you need to believe this, but first you build relationships so that they know you're a trustworthy person. And then if they're interested, right, you can tell them, if you care about sustainability about that, and that is usually the most effective way to change minds, because usually people just shut down if you just ambush them, like, you need to believe this.
Yeah.
So I would just say this is for all of us, right? Like, just build relationships with people and, make a case for your values within that framework of trust, I would say. Well, thanks a lot, everyone.